Hi there. Welcome to the From Lab to Launch podcast by Qualio, where we share inspiring stories from the people on the front lines of life sciences. Tune in and leave inspired to bring your life-saving products to the world.
Welcome to another episode of From Lab to Launch by Qualio, where we look at innovations, teams, and leaders shaping the future of life sciences. I'm Meg, your host, and today we're excited to welcome Dr. Dave Miller, Chief Scientific Officer of AustinPx. As complexity in pharmaceutical development reaches new heights, especially with over 60% of recent FDA novel molecular entities falling outside traditional drug design rules, the need for advanced formulation and manufacturing strategies has never been greater. Precision medicine is no longer a future goal, it's a present necessity. And that's exactly where Austin Pharmaceutics comes in. At the forefront of this shift is Austin Pharmaceutics KinetiSol technology, a powerful platform designed to make the undevelopable developable, transforming poorly soluble, highly potent small molecules into scalable, patient-ready therapies. Dr. Miller has spent more than 20 years in pharmaceutical R&D, helping drug developers navigate the challenges of bioavailability, permeability, and manufacturability for complex molecules. Today, we'll explore how CDMOs like Austin Pharmaceutics are empowering a new era of personalized treatment while offering product protection strategies that help biopharma companies stand out in a competitive, cost-sensitive market. We're thrilled to hear directly from one of the pioneers in this space. Let's dive in. Dave, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you've been in the pharmaceutical development space for over 2 decades, from your work at Roche to your leadership at Austin Pharmaceutics. What drew you to the challenge of tackling poorly soluble and undevelopable molecules?
Well, it was largely just a function of when I entered graduate school. I was originally a chemical engineering undergrad, and I got my bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. And it was during my undergraduate days that I interacted with a couple of professors at the College of Pharmacy at the University of Texas at Austin, that would become my PhD professors in the future. At the time, I was just looking for a job in the lab to get, to have a little bit of extra money. But as it turns out, I really enjoyed the science of pharmaceutical development. So I was learning a lot about chemical engineering and the petroleum and the chemical industry, and the science was interesting, but ultimately the end product that you were working on was not nearly as satisfying as the idea of working on a novel medicine that could ultimately improve the life or save the life of patients. So it was kind of drawn towards having more purpose in your work or more meaningful purpose in that regard. So that drew me to pharmaceutics in general. And then when I finished my bachelor's degree, I went to work in industry as an engineer briefly and then came back to graduate school. And when I entered graduate school, we were really starting to see in the pharma industry the first wave of insoluble molecules entering the pipeline. So in like the mid late 90s, the paradigm for drug discovery really shifted from what sort of irrational based drug discovery to more rational based. So rather than just recognizing that there's a compound in nature that has some beneficial pharmacological effect and then sort of isolating that compound and developing it, not really knowing the target that it's hitting and the underlying molecular biology that it's impacting. That was the old way of discovering drugs, and the new way was to really identify your target, understand the underlying biology, identify a target that if you could inhibit, if you could upregulate or downregulate, you could improve a disease state. So with that type of um, that paradigm shift in how drugs were discovered, that changed ultimately the chemistry of the molecules that were entering development pipelines, and they were becoming much larger, more lipophilic, and ultimately less soluble. So that was all happening in the mid to late 90s. So when I came into graduate school in 2002, those problems were manifesting as formulation issues, where it's like we've got these molecules that we've sort of discovered and that we're trying to push through development, but they're terribly insoluble, and we don't really have the formulation tools to solve all of these solubility issues, bioavailability issues. So that was the focus of my research from day one in graduate school. It's like, here's a rising problem in industry, and that's what the academic institutions sort of jumped on to study and to make inroads in solutions. So from the very beginning, I focused on poorly soluble drugs, um, a wide variety of formulation technologies, compositions of matter, and also processes for um, processing drugs with excipients to improve their solubility. And that focus, sort of through divine intervention or coincidence, kind of led me to a path where um, I was working with a plastics, historically a plastics process called melt extrusion that was being adapted for pharmaceutical applications and had already been sort of commercialized in pharma. And I was working on that technology, and it had some limitations that I was grappling with, and I was trying to innovate to get outside of those limitations. When I met a man by the name of Chris Bruff, who is Austin Pharmaceutics' chief technology officer. He was an industrial engineer who had developed a novel plastics recycling technology out of Brigham Young University and was part of a company that was commercializing that technology. Through an acquisition, he found himself in the Austin area where I was in graduate school, and our paths crossed. And interacting with him, I came to learn about his plastics manufacturing technology. And as he was describing how the technology works, he was describing it in terms of melt extrusion. Like, here are the limitations for melt extrusion for plastics recycling, and here's why this process I've developed is so much better for that application. He didn't realize at the time that the bells were going off in my head because I was also using melt extrusion and I was having the same limitations for drug delivery. So I explained that to him, and it didn't take long for the two of us to realize we really needed to put some pharmaceutical materials inside his large industrial scale plastics recycling machines. So we did that at the very tail end of my PhD work. In fact, I had it lined up where the last chapter of my PhD was going to be a completely different subject, and it turned out to be the first publication that on what would become KinetiSol. So we did the first of those experiments. The results that generated at that industrial scale really exceeded everybody's expectations in how revolutionary this could be in the field of bioavailability enhancement and more specifically manufacturing amorphous dispersions. So that led to joint IP filing between the University of Texas and Chris's company, and it spawned a new company at the time. It's called Dispersol Technologies, who obtained the exclusive license from UT to commercialize the pharmaceutical applications of the new technology, which we branded as KinetiSol. So at that point, through graduate study and then pioneering a new solubility enhancing technology, it was like the next 20 years of my career were pretty much set. Like, in, increasing the bioavailability of insoluble molecules was going to be the focus of the next 2 decades for me. Um, but while, we just started to develop the technology, and like I said, it was the tail end of my PhD. In fact, I had already accepted a position at Roche in New Jersey before I met Chris and we started working on KinetiSol. So sadly, I had to move to New Jersey and go work for Big Pharma. I'd already made a commitment. I wanted to stay in Austin. I would sleep on couches if I had to and just work on this new technology. But I was advised by my professors and other wiser people that I should go to Big Pharma for a few years and then let my professors and Chris continue to develop the technology at the university. And so they did that for 4 years. I went off to Big Pharma. And as a matter of fact, when I entered Roche, the problem of insoluble molecules became even bigger than I realized. I worked on uh, dozens of molecules at Roche from early preclinical development to life cycle management on existing commercial products. So really spanned the spectrum, and I worked on compounds at all phases. And a vast majority, 90% of those were solubility challenged molecules. So I really got to understand the true nature of the insolubility problem to the industry working at a large pharma. Um, and more importantly, at Roche, I started to encounter these molecules we kind of jokingly call brick dust. And it's basically compounds that are terribly insoluble in aqueous media, but also insoluble in everything, like organic solvents. They're so insoluble and their properties are such that they weren't at all amenable to any of the normal tools that we had access to. And even in some of the non-conventional tools. So there were a couple of molecules at Roche where it was almost like we don't have answers. They're so insoluble, their properties are so challenging. It's almost like we need to abandon this molecule and move on. Um, Roche was able to make some progress with a really cumbersome process that I think would only make sense if you're the largest pharmas and have those resources. But it was those molecules that I saw that at Roche that I realized were exactly what KinetiSol was discovered for. It was like these molecules are very promising in terms of their their properties, their therapeutic efficacy, the disease states that they're treating, but the issue is bioavailability. You can't deliver them to a patient in and achieve blood levels to where they can actually have their therapeutic effect. And when we look around at the formulation tools we have available to try to enable these molecules, none apply because the properties of these molecules are so challenging. But they're perfect compounds for KinetiSol. So it was at that point that I realized KinetiSol had a real future. You know, we weren't sure if it was sort of a me too technology that was a slight improvement on existing technologies. But while at Roche, I saw that it had true enablement capacity for certain molecules. So at that point, 4 years in at Roche, the technology had grown to the point where we needed to move outside of the university, take the company from being virtual, operating within the university, and setting up its own manufacturing and R&D facilities. Uh, and I was willing to come back to Austin, although I was on a nice trajectory at Roche. I was willing to risk my career on the technology because I not only believed in the capabilities, but also I saw real world examples where it could make a significant impact in terms of enabling molecules and going back to that whole career purpose of bringing life-saving medicines to patients who need them. I saw KinetiSol as being, for some of these molecules, the only path by which those molecules could reach patients. So, yeah, I left Roche in 2011 and came back to Austin to focus solely on KinetiSol. And I've been here almost 14 years, developing the technology in different capacities, working with big pharmas to enabling their molecules, but then also creating our own drug products along the way as well. We were actually doing clinical development as a company on molecules that had been approved and on the market, but the delivery systems were suboptimal. And we could apply our technology to those molecules to reach a section of the patient population that was underserved by the existing product. So we did that for a number of years, and we still have some clinical assets that we've partnered out that are in development. And then now, as Austin Pharmaceutics, our business model is much more open. We were pretty guarded about the technology in terms of trying to maintain trade secrets, and that was limiting to some extent who was willing to partner with us. But as we rebranded to Austin Pharmaceutics, we become sort of an all-purpose CDMO. With that, we've dropped the curtain that was shielding KinetiSol, opened it up to industry, and now we're working with vastly more clients and vastly more molecules and getting more shots on goal in terms of achieving the overall goal, which is to commercialize new medicines and make a difference in the lives of patients of various disease states. So that was, I would say, in a nutshell, that's my career path, but that was a huge nut if that was in a nutshell. But yeah, that's basically how I started in working on insoluble drugs and the path that I've taken from start of career to present day.
Great. Thanks for sharing that nutshell.
Yeah.
What was your vision when you first took on the role as Chief Scientific Officer at Austin Pharmaceutics, and how has that vision evolved as the industry continues the shift toward precision medicine?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. So, you know, so formally, uh, when I was with Dispersol, I was VP R&D. The focus was solely on developing the KinetiSol platform and spinning products out of that platform. And like I said, we had years of success in doing that. And even, working with external partners as well as developing our own pipeline. So as a result of being a sponsor company ourselves, we developed a breadth and depth of capabilities that were really impressive for a company our size. So when we got to a point where our clinical assets, two of them are approaching late stage, phase 3, and the board had some tough decisions about funding phase 3 development is an order of magnitude more expensive. And how do we want to invest our money? And so I think wisely they decided let's partner out these late stage assets to companies that are perhaps more suited for late stage clinical development and commercialization. And then let's look at what we have left. If we separate ourselves from our clinical assets and you take a look at what's at the company, it's a lot more than just KinetiSol. It is all sorts of, we have the full spectrum of capabilities of pharmaceutical development, from pre-formulation to preclinical to analytical to formulations development, um, manufacturing, process development, tech transfer, QC analytical. We just have all the tools in terms of the equipment and the facilities. We have this highly educated and experienced workforce. And and again, at every level, project management was excellent. It looked to us that we were sort of the perfect CDMO, boutique CDMO, a development partner for pharma companies of all sizes, that were looking for expertise in solving difficult formulation challenges, product development challenges, and doing that quickly, and efficiently. And from the perspective of a company who had been there before, developing assets of our own. So, we already had that mindset of every molecule is an opportunity to commercialize a new medicine. So we treated our molecules that way, and we treat our partner molecules that way. So with that as background, and as we started with Austin Pharmaceutics and I became the CSO, my perspective shifted it wasn't just about commercializing KinetiSol. It was about uh, commercializing products according to whatever means we needed to utilize to solve specific problems, towards the same end goal, which is to bring medicines to market. But at that point, it was more about looking at this company that we had built literally from nothing. I mean, we were virtual operating out of the university. Um, I was the first full-time boots on the ground employee. And when I came back from New Jersey, we literally had we had we had a little room in a virtual office space, basically. So to go from that to where we were when we rebranded as Austin Pharmaceutics, it's like we had built up this fully integrated product development company, and the focus was bringing that knowledge, that expertise to industry, uh, and taking on significantly more opportunities. And by opportunities, I mean new molecules, and help and work as an extension of our partners to develop products that could ultimately make it through clinical development, uh, through regulatory scrutiny, and ultimately to patients. So that's my focus now. KinetiSol is still my baby. It's still what got me here. The day is coming where that process is going to be commercialized, and all of this 20 years of effort will be well worth it and substantiated. But along the way, it's like there's KinetiSol. While we gave birth to KinetiSol gave birth to a company that now the reach and the strength of the company is such that you know we have a lot to offer the industry, and that stretches beyond just that one technology. And so it's fun to now watch the teams that have grown up under our supervision uh, work with some of the biggest pharma companies in the world to help solve some of the most difficult challenges, towards the goal of creating new medicines. So that, as CSO, that's what I'm most satisfied by, is the teams we've built and the company we've built as a result of what started out as a silly experiment putting pharma materials in dirty plastics recycling machines.
And look at what a big baby it's become.
I
You've grown
know
up so
it's
much. That's amazing.
when you're in the weeds every day, it's hard. You don't necessarily see the growth, but there are moments when you have these milestone moments, or even just regular day to day, where you step back and you go, "Wow, this all came from just like from nothing." It's hard to believe that
Yeah.
it's grown into what it is today. And a lot of those moments are when you're sitting across the table from a very large pharma client and they are hanging on your every word because they desperately need your expertise to solve a problem that they can't solve on their own. That's really gratifying when um, the, the most resourced
Uh,
pharma companies in the world still need your expertise to succeed. That's satisfying. And now
I
it's
can
company
only imagine.
expertise.
Yeah, I can only imagine. That's amazing. It's such an amazing time in medicine right now. We're hearing a lot about patient-centric drug design,
Yeah.
talking to a few other innovators in that space, and the move away from this kind of one-size-fits-all therapies. How does our Austin Pharmaceutics help biopharma companies navigate the shift and maintain that scalability and compliance all at the same time?
Yeah, that's a good question. And precision medicine means a lot of different things, and we've focused on precision medicine in different facets. So when we started out developing our own products, the idea was identifying products that exist on the market but are suboptimal in the sense that there is a certain percentage of the patient population that's not served by this medication for a reason that ultimately uh, boils down to drug absorption and pharmacokinetics. So if you look at our legacy um, clinical products that are still in development, deferricyrox and abiraterone. We went into the literature and you find evidence in the literature that in both of those cases, 25 to 30% of patients taking the medication don't respond. And the big pharmas that develop these um, uh, drug products understand, post market that the reason these patients don't respond is that they don't absorb the drug well. So a majority of the patient population, the for a majority of the patient population, the commercialized product is good enough. But there's a significant fraction, 20, 30% or more, for which it completely fails them. So we saw these molecules, we recognized an absorption issue, and we understood how we could solve that problem for patients. So for our first approach at precision medicine was subdividing the patient population to poor responders and developing a dosage form specifically for them that would overcome their absorption issues and allow them to now respond therapeutically to the molecule. So um, we did that in abiraterone and deferricyrox, which are still making their way through the clinic. But that was sort of the first way we sort of using precision medicine to really focus on underserved portions of the patient population. Uh, and now with working with other clients in biotech or medium to large pharma, precision medicine slightly different. I think they're, looking at a couple of different things. One is, if they're not first to market, if they're not first in class, they want to be best in class. So they're optimizing the molecule itself to provide advantages to the patient. But there's also opportunity for the drug product, not just the molecule, but the actual dosage form, the presentation to the patient. There's opportunities to optimize that for the patient's needs as well. So it's not about just modifying the molecule, it's about the delivery system. And so different examples of this is where you understand there's a specific patient need. Like for instance, if you're targeting as a portion of a general population, like the geriatric segment, where a number of these patients are dysphagic, and thus they can't swallow tablets or capsules as your normal adult patients would, then they need a presentation that's suitable for them. So something that they can suspend in a beverage or sprinkle on food. And so that's one example. Another way we're working quite a bit lately on pediatric dosage forms. And so the designing the patient centricity portion of the drug product design is that you're trying to reach, it's a pediatric population. So first off, it's got to be palatable. Most drugs are very bitter, so you've got to deal with flavor. Um, Two, the driver for a lot of what we're doing right now is that kids are used to taking syrups or solution-based medication,
Hmm.
but a lot of the molecules that would serve the pediatric population aren't stable in those solution dosage forms. They'll actually chemically degrade over time. So it can't be a liquid form, which is more traditional. We need to develop a solid form, but it needs to be swallowable. And also, when you're dealing with a pediatric population, the dose changes based on the age and weight of the kid. So if you're talking about a liquid's easy because you can give them a teaspoon or a tablespoon, but how do you subdivide a solid dose? You're like trying to chop up an aspirin or something, just eyeball. It's not safe. You can't do it safely. So what we've been working on are very small oral dosage forms. We call them mini tablets that we can that solve that issue where they're swallowable because they're very small, but then you can through a dispensing device and literally just counting clicks. It's 3 clicks for a child of that age or that weight. It's 6 clicks for a bigger child. So they can meet a caregiver, a parent can actually meter out the dose very accurately. The child can swallow these mini tablets without really realizing that they're taking medicine. And then the flavor component, we can coat these mini tablets to prevent them from dissolving in the saliva, but then immediately dissolving in the stomach. So they won't have to deal with the bitter flavor of a lot of molecules. So that's another way in which sort of it's precision medicine. It's designing dosage forms one that are already dealing with difficult molecules like we always do, but then on top of that, adding complexity of like the specific needs of a given patient population, adding additional complexity to your drug product design. And, so Austin Pharmaceutics is really important to that because we have a long history of working with challenging molecules. And then you layer on very strict requirements for the drug product, you've got additional complexity that if you haven't, we solve difficult formulation. We've been solving difficult formulation problems for over a decade. Plus, we have a sponsor mentality. While we're developing the drug product, we're also just inherently thinking about regulatory scale up tech transfer challenges because we've been there before. We've done that. We're not going to solve a formulation problem just to create a regulatory or a manufacturing problem. We've lived that life. We know how to deal with these issues simultaneously. So I think that's what with our clients when it comes to precision medicine, tailoring drug products for specific segments of the population, it confounds the typical, I mean, drug product development is difficult in and of itself, and then you add on additional complexity and it's really challenging. And for that, I think you need a partner like us, someone who very sophisticated technically, but who's also got a lot of experience as a sponsor. We've got scar tissue from our own past development experiences. We bring that to the table. We took on those injuries to save our clients some of those painful learning experiences. And so I think that's really where we've had a huge impact when it comes to precision medicine is dealing with complexity in what they really need us, what the deliverables are, but also sort of the intangibles of avoiding pitfalls that are yet to come. I think that's really key. And then likewise, I think there's a lot of developing molecules for specific genetic mutations as well, sort of
Hmm.
to like, particularly in oncology, segmenting a patient population according to mutation, understanding when a molecule it works based on a specific gene mutation. And there again, I think that's a situation where you need differentiation um, and understanding, what patient subset you're targeting and developing a drug product that suits that specific patient population as well, rather than just sort of throwing this custom designed molecule for a specific gene mutation into a general dosage form and hoping it works. When you combine drug product development expertise with molecular design, you can really come up with some outstanding new medicines for very specific subsets of patient populations that differ either by age, disease state, or even known genetic mutations. Sort of the ways that we're subdividing the patient population is great in terms of tailoring therapy. And then it's not just about the actual molecule, it's about the delivery system as well, and dealing with lifestyle issues and designing the delivery system to accommodate all important aspects to the patient.
Yeah, that's so important and such a great evolution of medicine that it's evolving in that patient-centric way.
Right.
Dave, have you found it to be a challenge to get developers and sponsors, especially in a highly regulated market, to develop these new formulation strategies like KinetiSol, or do they recognize the urgency and advantages?
Yeah, it's tough. New drug delivery technologies in pharma are tough because it is highly regulated. The developers are concerned about what the regulatory bodies are going to say about a new technology. Um, it- but there again, our experience as a sponsor company is really helpful. So when clients approach us, they they recognize the need for KinetiSol, but they're apprehensive about the regulatory history. We can tell them that we've been face to face with the FDA. We've talked to their CMC reviewers, and they view KinetiSol as a, a new name for old technology, basically. In the eyes of a regulatory reviewer, it's a granulation technology. There's a bunch of different granulation technologies. Um, what they, what the FDA asks us to show is that we have the right control strategy, that we know how to characterize the product to ensure quality on manufacturing and on stability, and then also control of the process. And we've been able to demonstrate those control strategies to the FDA with flying colors. So we have FDA meeting minutes where we can show clients, look, this isn't a regulatory concern. The technology, we've been to registration scale as a company. We haven't quite crossed the commercialization finish line, but we've gotten very close. We've paved the way to commercialization, and now it's about, finding a molecule that can, attrition is a tough in pharma. There's so many ways for molecules to fail, and we haven't been shielded from that either. We've had some tough losses along the way,
Mhm.
but the more molecules we work on, the more likely we are to go to find that molecule that walks that entire path. We've already paved the path, and now it's about finding a molecule that makes it all the way. And we've overcome all the key hurdles along the way. It's just a matter of getting something to survive phase three and and get to an NDA approval. But so yeah, our history as a sponsor company and the work that we've done with other big pharmas and how far we've progressed different molecules is really helpful to make a case for the low risk that one faces when working with KinetiSol. So the regulatory bodies, the FDA specifically, sees no real risk associated with KinetiSol. It's a granulation technology. We've demonstrated our knowledge of control strategies. They're satisfied. Um, we've got a number of examples of products that were geared up for, or still are geared up for commercialization. It's just a matter of getting them through clinical development. So what we've been starting to tell clients now is um, it's reasonable, given the late stage assets that we're working on, that KinetiSol will have a commercial product within the next 2 to 3 years. So if you're talking with us now with a phase one asset, before commercialization becomes relevant for you, that will all be proven out. And so there's really no risk now to anyone who's working with us currently on early stage assets. It'll be fully commercialized a couple times over by the time those molecules make it to market. So as we've matured, it's like I said, we've been working on KinetiSol for almost 20 years now, and it's taken a long time to build up this body of evidence, essentially, that KinetiSol is a technology you can put your drug product asset on. Um, in the early days, it was a lot more challenging, trying to convince a pharma company that this novel technology was worth the risk. But there were, as you said, and when you asked me the question, and it's what I saw at Roche when I was there with these brick dust molecules.
Mhm.
There were several early adopters that just knew they didn't have a choice. This was the only path that their molecule could take to market. You couldn't formulate it any other way. And and we had great technical success with some of those molecules early on. But like I said, there's so many ways to fail in pharma, and sadly, all of those molecules failed along the way. So even those early adopters, even they believed in the technology, but ultimately, pharma is a tough game to succeed. So
Yeah.
so now the strategy is more as many shots on goal as we can get. Like I said, all the path to commercialization has been paved, and and molecules are walking along that path now. So we'll soon be over the hump, and it the perceived risk will hopefully dissipate, and KinetiSol will become the fully disruptive technology it's set up to be.
Only after 2 decades it'll get there, but
Yeah, the
it's still
wheels of
fairly
pharma turn
quick.
slowly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Still fairly quick in the grand scheme of things.
yeah.
Um, Looking ahead, Dave, how do you see the CDMO and pharma manufacturing landscape evolving over the next 2 or 3 years, especially in light of growing molecule complexity and regulatory scrutiny?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, from my perspective, I think these CDMOs, it's the days of the one-stop shop. I think we have everything soup to nuts to take your molecule from early stage all the way to commercialization. I think as these molecules become more complex and expertise is really required in specific areas, I think you're going to see these larger CDMOs start to falter. People are going to pivot to smaller, sort of nimble, more expert CDMO partners to solve specific problems. Like molecules are becoming more complex. We're really tailoring them towards specific patient population, sort of template formulations, generic approaches to developing drug products aren't going to satisfy the needs of the current and future drug product pipelines. So I see CDMOs like ourselves that have a depth of expertise in solving a number of major challenges becoming more the norm. Developers need really an extension of their capabilities. They need external experts to help them solve the major challenges and to develop more specialized medications. So I really, we dealt with this as a sponsor as well, where you go into these large CDMOs and you get on the front end, you're talking to experts who assure you that they've dealt with your issue before and they're going to escort you through all of these issues and to achieve your goals. But when projects actually kick off, those folks that sold you on the front end aren't there. You're dealing with people you haven't talked to before, and their level of experience, their attachment to your molecule, is not what you had hoped it would be. And I can just imagine the future of drug development, these more complex molecules, trying to come into these larger CDMO organizations and getting sold by the A team and then developed by the D team. It's just, well, we're already seeing it now. We have a lot of clients that have that story to tell. They failed at the larger C, and then they've pivoted to us to solve the problems that our competitors can't solve. So, yeah, I think it's really going to be key. You need CDMO with a depth of expertise and tools, a background as a company history of developing their own products is really important too, as I think, because it's not just a matter of doing the formulations and analytical development. You've got to have an eye towards regulatory and clinical issues, and which we do. So yeah, ultimately, I think it just comes down to as the molecules become more sophisticated, more complex, so too do the developers need to also become more sophisticated and more complex, and can't lean on um, you know template approaches and treat development like a mill where you just turn the crank and and good enough deliverables come out the other end. I think those days are gone. I think you really have to consider every molecule as a new problem and a substantial problem to be solved.
Thank you for your insights, Dave.
Yeah, my
Our
pleasure.
last question is more of a fun one. If we ran into you at a bookstore or at your local library, in what section would we find you?
That's um well, it would certainly be nonfiction. I love nonfiction, and it splits like three ways. It's like historical nonfiction, like you know, stories of triumph, historical stories like
Yeah.
what was the book about, was it Sir Edwin Shackleton, the crew that was lost in Antarctica and their
Okay.
survival stories. I love stories like that, just sort of, and maybe it's because for 20 years it felt like we've been in a storm, that we're still fighting. But I love that, like the grit, the tenacity. I love stories that demonstrate that spirit of just keep going, and eventually you'll be successful. So those I like, similarly, but biographies of accomplished people, and then a lot of books about uh, not really self-help, but sort of understanding self-improvement, like expanding you get sometimes, like for me, if you've come up through science, is that you tend to, just as a result of being alone in a lab for a while, you get a sort of narrow focus on the world. And at some point it's important to try to expand your focus. And I've found like reading various nonfiction books have helped me to expand my focus. It's kind of spending a number of years isolated in the lab alone. It's good to hear other people's ideas and views on the world. So yeah, nonfiction, is kind of always where I go for inspiration and ideas towards personal development.
Well, thank you, Dave. And where can we go to find you and connect and learn more about yourself and Austin Pharmaceutics' journey?
Yeah, we've got a great website at austinpx.com. You can find everything there. We even have virtual tours of our lab space, all of our publication history, our bios. I've recently started writing a blog series. So I have all these thoughts, and um, you know, if you scientific journals are really not the right outlet for just kind of
Yeah.
quickly publishing thoughts and ideas. And it was suggested by our CEO that you should just start writing a blog. Whenever you have an idea, you want to communicate and get feedback, write a blog, post it on LinkedIn. We'll put it on our website. We'll solicit comments from the audience. And that's been fun. So I've only done one so far, but I've got three more lined up. And so, yeah, I encourage everybody to go to our website if you want to learn about the company and myself. And then whenever I post a blog, the idea is it's kind of not in, I wouldn't say that the idea is supposed to be incendiary, but it's supposed to spark debate a little bit. So read the blogs and leave me you know crude, mean messages if you feel so inclined. We're gonna so
Oh, no mean messages or vibes, Dave.
yeah.
But yeah, thank you for sharing. We'll all check in with your blog and your new post coming up. Thank you so much for
Okay.
sharing your journey. And I appreciate your time today, Dave.
Yeah, thank you. This is fun. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of From Lab to Launch, brought to you by Qualio. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe and give the show a positive review. It really helps us out. For more information about Qualio, our guest today, or to be a guest on a future episode, please refer to the show notes. Until next time.